They thought I'd never fight back. My family replaced me with my cousin, taking everything I'd worked for. I walked away, defeated. But what they didn't know? I was coming back for it all. And when they begged for mercy, I showed them just how powerful revenge could be. If you've ever been betrayed, this story is for you. Hit subscribe, and let's begin. Samantha had always lived in the shadows of her family's expectations. The eldest child, she had always taken on the responsibility, working long hours to make sure everything was perfect, both in the family business and at home. Her parents often praised her cousin Rachel for her natural charm and business sense. Rachel was the one they believed had the potential to lead, the one they showed off to their friends and clients. Meanwhile, Samantha quietly did the hard work, pouring every ounce of her energy into keeping things running smoothly, yet never receiving the recognition she deserved. But Samantha had dreams too. She dreamed of building something of her own. She had a vision of her own future that wasn't tied to her parents' expectations, a desire to step out of Rachel's shadow and create a legacy. Samantha had always been the quiet, responsible one, but she was starting to resent that role. The resentment hadn't built overnight. It had crept in slowly, small moments when she felt overlooked, unheard, dismissed. Yet she never voiced her frustration. She buried it deep inside, convincing herself that one day all her efforts would pay off. Her family, especially her father, would see her value. But the truth was, her dedication felt like it was fading into the background. No matter how hard she worked, it never seemed to be enough. One evening, as she walked into the family office, she felt something shift in the air. Her father, who usually welcomed her with a warm smile, didn't even look up from his desk. Rachel was sitting next to him, her posture relaxed, her laughter filling the room as if she had just made a joke. Samantha's heart sank, but she pushed it down. She had work to do, but the moment she walked into that room was the moment everything changed. Her father finally looked up, a calm, almost detached expression on his face. "Samantha, we've been thinking," he began, his words slow, deliberate. "We've decided that Rachel will be taking over the company." Samantha's stomach dropped. "What?" she asked, barely able to contain her disbelief. "This is Rachel's moment," her father continued, not even glancing at her. "She's got the drive, the connections. We believe she'll take this business to new heights." The words hit Samantha like a punch to the gut. For years, she had given everything, her time, her energy, her life, to this company. And in a single conversation, it was all taken away. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because Rachel had the charm, the look, the aura of someone destined to succeed. But what about Samantha's dreams? What about her years of sacrifices? She had worked tirelessly behind the scenes, solving problems, managing operations, and making sure everything ran without a hitch. Why wasn't that enough? "Dad," Samantha said, her voice shaky but determined. "I've been here for years. I've built this. I've given everything to this company. And now you want to just give it to her?" Her father's eyes flickered with something, guilt, maybe, but he quickly masked it. "It's just business, Sam. It's not personal." The words stung, but Samantha didn't let them show. She took a deep breath, fighting back the wave of anger rising in her chest. But it was there, burning hot, igniting something in her. She had always been loyal, but loyalty had never been enough. She had been cast aside for someone who didn't even understand the sacrifices she had made. As her father and Rachel continued to discuss the transition, Samantha's world began to spin. This wasn't just a business decision. It was a betrayal. Her loyalty had been taken for granted, and now she had a choice to make. She could walk away, continue doing the same thing she had always done, be the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who kept the family business afloat. Or she could fight back. Samantha had always been the quiet force behind the success of the family business. But what no one knew What she had carefully hidden behind years of loyalty and sacrifice was that she had her own dreams. Dreams that had nothing to do with the family's legacy. Ever since she was a teenager, Samantha had harbored a love for architecture. She would often sketch designs for buildings, imagining cities filled with innovative structures and sustainable spaces. It was her escape, her passion, a side of her that had been buried beneath the weight of expectations. But as time passed, her love for architecture was replaced with the feeling of duty to the family business. She let go of her own aspirations, telling herself that the family was her priority, that her role was to support them, to build their legacy. Yet deep down, she knew that she could never be fulfilled as long as she ignored what made her heart race. When she first started seeing the subtle signs of favoritism toward Rachel, something inside her snapped. It wasn't just the decision to pass the company over to Rachel. It was the culmination of years of neglecting her own identity. She had been constantly overlooked, pushed aside, all while her cousin seemed to coast through life, effortlessly winning the approval of everyone around her. For the first time in years, Samantha allowed herself to think about what she truly wanted. What if I pursued architecture? What if I built my own dream? The thought filled her with both fear and excitement, but she couldn't run away from the reality of the situation. The family business was the foundation of everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed for. How could she walk away from it now? But after the betrayal, everything changed. The business wasn't hers anymore. They had given it to Rachel, again, the favored one, the daughter who had always been praised for her natural abilities, her charm, and her ability to play the role of the perfect child. Rachel had always been given opportunities without working for them. Samantha, on the other hand, had done everything, built systems, managed employees, and handled crises, only to be brushed aside when it mattered most. The sting of rejection was sharp, but as Samantha thought about her future, she realized that this was her moment. Her loyalty to her family had been taken for granted. Now it was time for her to take what she deserved. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about reclaiming her life. Rachel had always been the golden child, the one everyone adored. From a young age, she knew how to work the room, charm people with her smile, and create a persona of being the perfect, carefree daughter. She was everything her parents wanted in an heir to the family business. But there was more to Rachel than just the golden girl act. Beneath the surface, she was deeply insecure, constantly fighting the pressure of being the one everyone expected to succeed. Rachel had always been told she was the future, the one who would take over the family business. Yet, for all her outward confidence, there was a constant voice in her head telling her she wasn't enough. She didn't have the work ethic that Samantha had, nor did she have the experience. All she had was her charm and her ability to convince others that she was the right choice. But deep down, Rachel feared failure. She feared that no matter how much she worked, she would never live up to the expectations set for her. That fear drove her actions, and in her mind, taking over the family business wasn't just about continuing a legacy. It was about proving to everyone and to herself that she was worthy of the title. When her parents made the decision to give her the company, Rachel felt a rush of relief. It was what she had always been told she was meant to do. But as she took over, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't truly deserve it. That maybe, just maybe, Samantha had earned it more. But rather than confront those feelings of insecurity, Rachel chose to bury them, convincing herself that this was her moment, her time to shine. Samantha's internal conflict grew with every passing day. She had once dreamed of stepping into the world of architecture, but now the weight of betrayal and loss pushed her toward an uncertain future. She wasn't just angry at Rachel. She was angry at herself for allowing this to happen. Samantha spent hours each day thinking about how everything could have been different, how she could have stood up sooner, how she could have pushed back against her family's expectations. But the pain of rejection was too much, and in that pain, she found a burning desire for something more. She began researching architecture programs, but something kept pulling her back to the family business. A sense of responsibility, a sense of loss. But as she sat at her desk, staring at the empty chair where Rachel now sat, something shifted. Samantha realized that Rachel didn't deserve this. She had taken everything without truly understanding what it meant to carry the burden. And now, it was Samantha's turn to take back what had been stolen from her. Not just the business, but the life she deserved. The realization hit her like a wave. For years, she had stayed in the shadows, waiting for someone to recognize her worth. But the truth was, she had never allowed herself to truly believe in her own value. She had put everyone else's dreams above her own. This was the moment when everything changed. Her hands shook as she looked at the family business, the company she had built with her blood, sweat, and tears. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized that Rachel's victory wasn't a final blow. It was the catalyst for her own transformation. Samantha felt the tears well up in her eyes, not because she was defeated, but because she had finally allowed herself to feel everything she had buried for so long. The anger, the hurt, the loss, it was all there. But with it came a deep, burning determination. She wasn't going to walk away quietly anymore. This was her fight, and she was going to take everything back. The family's reaction to Samantha's decision to fight back was mixed. Her mother, who had always been a silent observer, was taken aback. "Samantha," she said, her voice trembling, "don't do this. It's too much. Rachel is the future." Samantha looked at her mother, her heart heavy. "You never saw me, Mom. You never saw all the years I gave. It's time I fight for myself, for what I've earned." Rachel's response was cold and dismissive. "You had your chance, Samantha. You always were the hardworking one, but you were never the right one. Now it's my turn." The tension between the sisters was palpable. But for Samantha, it wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about proving to herself that she was more than just the shadow of Rachel's success. Samantha had spent the past few days seething with anger, but she also knew she couldn't let her emotions take control. If she wanted to reclaim what had been taken from her, she needed to think carefully, plan every step, and strike when the time was right. The business was only part of it. What truly mattered now was making her family and Rachel understand that she was not someone to be dismissed. She had something far more dangerous than resentment. She had determination. Her first step was clear. Samantha wasn't going to storm into her father's office and demand the company back. No, that would be too simple. She needed to hit Rachel where it would hurt the most, the spotlight. For all of Rachel's charm and ease, she lacked one thing Samantha had always had: the work ethic, the drive, the resilience to make the business succeed. The more Samantha thought about it, the more she realized she had been the one who had built everything from the ground up. Now it was time for Rachel to face the consequences of taking what wasn't hers. Samantha began making calls, quietly gathering intel. She reached out to former colleagues, old business contacts, and clients she had worked with before, people who knew her capabilities and the sacrifices she had made. She planned to pull the rug out from under Rachel's carefully crafted image. Rachel might have been handed the reins, but Samantha was about to expose the cracks in her cousin's carefully constructed world. But her plan wasn't just about business. It was also about personal redemption. Samantha had always held back her dreams, telling herself that loyalty to her family came first. Now she realized that the life she had built wasn't just about the company. It was about reclaiming her own identity. She wasn't just Samantha, the responsible daughter. She was Samantha, a woman capable of success on her own terms. She couldn't just watch as Rachel and her parents thrived off her hard work. She would confront them, make them see her not just as the dutiful daughter, but as the woman who would take control, no matter what it took. Rachel was everything Samantha wasn't: effortless, confident, and adored by everyone. But as Samantha strategized her revenge, Rachel was slowly unraveling in ways no one could see. The weight of the family's expectations pressed down on her in ways that she wasn't prepared for. Though she had always been given the role of heir, the truth was she didn't want it. Not really. The truth was Rachel didn't have the same passion for the business that Samantha had. Rachel had never worked a day in her life without someone helping her, smoothing out the edges. She wasn't cut out for the late nights, the endless meetings, and the demands that came with managing a multi-million-dollar company. But now that it was in her hands, she couldn't show weakness. She had to prove she deserved it, even if the pressure was suffocating. When the news of Samantha's quiet departure began to settle in, Rachel found herself feeling more doubt than ever. She hadn't expected her cousin to just accept the betrayal, and now Rachel feared that Samantha's quiet rage would turn into something far worse, something that could threaten everything Rachel had taken for granted. Rachel began losing sleep. The decisions she made felt wrong, and her self-doubt started to eat at her. In meetings, she found herself second-guessing everything she said, worried that her father's eyes were always on her, judging her every move. She wasn't ready for this kind of responsibility, but there was no way out now. And every time she looked at the family business, the company that had been handed to her without her even having to ask, she could feel the weight of it pushing her down further. As the days passed, Rachel's insecurities deepened. She started wondering if she was worthy of the position at all. If only she had worked as hard as Samantha, she thought. Maybe it wouldn't feel so empty. But it was too late for regret. She had already been handed the keys and she couldn't give them back. The tension in the family was palpable. Samantha had been the silent worker, the one who kept everything going behind the scenes. But now that she was standing up for herself, refusing to let Rachel take everything from her, the family was beginning to fracture. Her parents, who had always believed Rachel was the golden child, didn't know how to react to Samantha's newfound boldness. They had expected Samantha to quietly accept the transition, like she always did. But she wasn't doing that anymore, and that scared them. Her father tried to maintain the image of unity, but he was conflicted. He had always relied on Samantha to manage the company's day-to-day operations. But now, seeing his daughter fight back, he began to question whether he had made the right decision in favoring Rachel. His loyalty to Rachel had blinded him to the depth of Samantha's contribution to the family's success. As for Rachel, the tension was growing between her and her parents. She could sense the growing dissatisfaction in her father's gaze, the way her mother started questioning her choices. It was subtle at first, but the cracks were beginning to show. Her once unquestionable role in the family business was now being scrutinized. Samantha, however, wasn't worried about her family's reactions anymore. They had made their choice. They had chosen Rachel, again. Now it was her turn to make a decision for herself. A decision that didn't involve her family's approval. The anger she had once buried deep down was now a fire that burned hotter every day. She was tired of waiting for recognition. She was ready to take back what was hers. Samantha had already begun taking steps to expose the cracks in Rachel's foundation. But as she prepared for her next move, she knew that the path she was on was fraught with danger. The longer she waited, the more her resentment grew. And every time she imagined Rachel taking credit for all of her hard work, the anger burned even hotter. But her plan wasn't just about business. It was about making Rachel see the consequences of her actions. Samantha was calculating, patient. Every move she made was deliberate, and she knew that she couldn't rush it. If she did, she would lose the element of surprise. The suspense was building. Samantha began contacting former clients and suppliers, quietly gathering the support she needed to take control of the business. She was setting up meetings, making connections, and learning more about the weaknesses in the business Rachel now controlled. She wasn't just preparing for a confrontation. She was preparing to take back everything: her life, her business, and her dignity. But Rachel wasn't oblivious. She could feel the tension growing, and it only made her more defensive. She began tightening her grip on the business, trying to assert her dominance in ways that felt increasingly desperate. Samantha knew the showdown was coming, and she was ready. The day had finally arrived. Samantha had carefully planned every step of her retaliation, but nothing could prepare her for the raw emotion that coursed through her when she stood face to face with Rachel. Samantha had grown tired of playing the part of the quiet, loyal daughter. This time, she wasn't holding back. The office felt cold as Rachel sat behind the desk, flipping through papers with the same air of indifference she had worn for years. She glanced up as Samantha walked in, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. "What's the matter, Samantha? Still sulking over not getting your way?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Samantha's pulse quickened. She hadn't expected Rachel to be so dismissive, but it only fueled the fire inside her. "You think this is a game, Rachel?" she shot back, her voice firm, each word laced with years of pent-up frustration. "You think you deserve this business more than me? You didn't earn it. You were handed everything while I worked to build it from the ground up." Rachel's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "Oh, please, Samantha. You're just bitter because you didn't get the recognition you thought you deserved. You're always the martyr, the one who does everything behind the scenes, but that doesn't make you irreplaceable." Samantha's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She had always resented how Rachel never acknowledged her sacrifices, how she always took the easy route. But now she could see the cracks in her cousin's facade. She wasn't as untouchable as she thought. Samantha decided it was time to make Rachel face the consequences of her actions, not just in business, but personally. "Maybe you don't realize it, but you've been living in a fantasy world," Samantha said, stepping closer to the desk. "You think you've got it all figured out, but you don't know the first thing about running this company. You'll make one wrong move, and it'll all come crashing down. You're in over your head, Rachel." Rachel's eyes narrowed, her confidence faltering for the first time. "You think you know everything, don't you? Maybe you're just jealous because you can't stand seeing me succeed." Samantha's eyes softened with a mixture of anger and pity. "It's not about you succeeding, Rachel. It's about you thinking you can take what isn't yours without understanding the consequences. You don't even deserve this business." The tension between them was palpable. Samantha had finally spoken the truth, one that Rachel had been too blind to see. Rachel might have been handed the business, but Samantha was ready to take it back. This was just the beginning. Rachel's confident facade was starting to crack. For years, she had been the golden child, the one everyone turned to, the one who seemed to have everything handed to her. But as Samantha's words hit her, doubt started to seep in. She had always been able to charm her way through life, relying on her looks and charisma to get ahead. But running the family business was different. It wasn't about charm. It was about hard work, responsibility, and dedication, things Rachel had never truly had to learn. As the hours passed after her confrontation with Samantha, Rachel found herself second-guessing everything. She looked at the piles of paperwork on her desk, the reports, the deals, and for the first time, she felt overwhelmed. Her insecurities bubbled to the surface, and she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe Samantha was right. Maybe she wasn't prepared for this role. Rachel's hands trembled as she picked up the phone to call one of the top investors. She had always been good at pretending, but now, as she spoke to her contacts, she could hear the doubt in her voice. They noticed it too, the crack in her confidence, the uncertainty. She wasn't the person they thought she was. As the conversation ended, Rachel slammed the phone down in frustration. She had never felt this exposed, this vulnerable, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized that Samantha had been right all along. She had never truly earned her place. She was only there because her family had made her believe she was entitled to it. The tension in the family was thick. Samantha's confrontation had changed everything. Her father, who had always seen Rachel as the future, was now starting to feel the weight of the decision he had made. He had watched Samantha pour her soul into the business for years, but he had taken it all for granted. Samantha's mother, too, was beginning to feel torn. She had always supported Rachel, seeing her as the perfect daughter. But now, seeing Samantha stand up for herself, she couldn't help but wonder if they had made a mistake. "Samantha," her mother said one evening, her voice soft but filled with concern. "What are you going to do now? You've been so loyal to this family. But what's left for you if the business isn't yours?" Samantha's eyes met her mother's, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her decision. She had spent her entire life trying to please her family, but now, that loyalty had been betrayed. "I don't know what comes next," Samantha admitted, "but I'm not going to sit by and watch everything I worked for be taken away. I've given too much to just walk away now." Her mother didn't say anything more, but the look in her eyes spoke volumes. Samantha had made her choice, and it was clear that her family didn't fully understand her decision. But this wasn't about them anymore. It was about Samantha. And for the first time in her life, she was doing something for herself. The stakes were rising. As Samantha pushed back, the pressure mounted. She knew she had to act fast if she wanted to take back control of the business. But with every move she made, Rachel fought back harder. The more Samantha exposed Rachel's insecurities, the more desperate her cousin became. Samantha started gathering evidence of Rachel's mistakes: fumbled deals, poorly executed plans, and glaring errors in judgment that could potentially cost the business. But with each piece of evidence, the tension in the family grew. Rachel was starting to retaliate, using her charm and connections to undermine Samantha at every turn. The battle between them was escalating, and it wasn't just a battle for the company. It was a battle for recognition, for respect, and for a future neither of them was willing to lose. Samantha knew the time had come to make her next move. She could feel the weight of the family's expectations pressing down on her, but she was done waiting for validation. This was her battle now, and she would fight it with everything she had. But how? She wasn't just going to walk into her father's office and demand the business back. That wouldn't be enough to prove her worth. She needed something more. Proof. She needed to expose Rachel's flaws, show her family that their choice was driven by charm and favoritism, not merit. Samantha had already begun gathering evidence of Rachel's missteps: business decisions that were reckless, deals that had been poorly executed, and reports that exposed just how unprepared Rachel was for this role. Samantha knew that Rachel's mistakes could be the key to her downfall, but she didn't want to just expose Rachel's flaws publicly. Samantha knew she could do it more effectively, personally. She needed to confront Rachel directly, to expose her weaknesses in front of their parents, to make Rachel see how far she had fallen behind. Rachel was used to being the golden child, always praised and never questioned, but Samantha was ready to bring her down a notch. Samantha's next move was simple. She would set up a meeting with their parents, but it wouldn't just be about confronting Rachel's errors. Samantha planned to present a new vision, a vision where she took back control of the business. This time, the family would see her not as the dutiful daughter who always stayed in the background, but as the leader she was meant to be. Rachel had always relied on her charm to navigate through life. She had been handed the family business without ever having to prove herself. But now that the pressure was mounting, Rachel felt the weight of her new responsibilities in ways she never had before. The confidence she had once exuded was starting to crack, and beneath it was a woman full of doubt and fear. She hadn't expected Samantha to fight back so fiercely. Rachel had assumed that her cousin would simply bow out, as she always had before, but now Samantha was planning to confront her. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about ego. If Samantha took control of the family business, Rachel would lose everything she had worked so hard to be. The recognition, the admiration, the respect. It would all slip away, and she would return to being the girl who was never truly good enough. Rachel wasn't going to let that happen. Desperation began to cloud her judgment. She started to make secret moves, tighter control over the finances, bringing in new investors to back her up, even considering hiring a PR firm to bolster her image. She was willing to do whatever it took to hold on to the business, even if it meant making reckless decisions. Her desperation was starting to show. She would meet with clients, but her conversations felt forced, the facade of confidence slipping with each interaction. Rachel felt like she was walking on a tightrope, afraid that one wrong move would send everything crashing down. Yet the more she pushed to keep control, the more mistakes she made. Her insecurities began to manifest, and with them, the fear that Samantha might be right all along, that she was never meant to carry the weight of the business on her shoulders. As the battle between Samantha and Rachel escalated, the rest of the family began to feel the tension. Samantha's parents, particularly her father, had always seen Rachel as the heir to the family business. Rachel was the one with the charm, the one who made the right connections, the one who could convince others of her worth. But now, with Samantha's challenges becoming more apparent, they couldn't ignore the cracks in Rachel's leadership. Her mother, who had always supported Rachel, was starting to see Samantha's side of things. She had watched Samantha put in years of hard work, managing the business, handling difficult situations, and making sure the family's legacy was preserved. Her sacrifices hadn't been in vain, but they had been overlooked. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Samantha's mother asked one evening, her voice uncertain. Her father, though, wasn't as easily convinced. He had always believed that Rachel had the natural ability to lead, and he didn't want to acknowledge that his choice might have been flawed. "Samantha will always have a place in this business, but Rachel is our future." But even as he spoke, there was a shift in his voice, a hesitation. He had begun to see that Samantha wasn't the quiet, obedient daughter he had always assumed her to be. She was a force, and if he didn't recognize that, he might lose her forever. The family dynamics were beginning to shift. As much as they wanted to believe in Rachel's ability to take over, they were beginning to question if they had been wrong about everything. Was Rachel really the future of the business, or had they failed to see the potential in Samantha? The stakes were rising. Samantha had made her plan, but now the obstacles in her path were becoming more apparent. She couldn't just walk into her parents' office and take control. Rachel had already put her own strategies in place, and her desperation was beginning to manifest in dangerous ways. Samantha found herself facing new challenges. One of the investors she had contacted had backed out, fearful of taking sides in the family dispute. Another one of Rachel's allies had started to spread rumors about Samantha's leadership capabilities, attempting to undermine her credibility. And to make matters worse, her mother was beginning to pull back, unsure of which side to support. But Samantha wasn't backing down. She refused to let Rachel's manipulation control her any longer. She knew the family business inside and out. She had been the one working late, making the tough decisions, and ensuring that everything stayed afloat. Now it was time to show them that she was the one who could lead, and Rachel's reign was going to be short-lived. Samantha began to execute her plan with precision. She reached out to the key people in the business, sowing seeds of doubt about Rachel's leadership and offering them a chance to work with her. She quietly gathered support, ensuring that when the time came, she would have the backing she needed to reclaim her place. As Rachel continued to flounder under the pressure, Samantha's grip on the business tightened. The battle was far from over, but the end game was clear. She would take back what was rightfully hers. The atmosphere in the family office was tense, thick with anticipation. Samantha had prepared for this moment for weeks. It was her time to confront Rachel, not just about her failures as a leader, but about the truth that everyone had overlooked for far too long. It was time to expose Rachel's weaknesses, to show her family what they had failed to see. The meeting had been set, and Rachel was in her usual place, sitting behind the desk with a false air of confidence, though her eyes betrayed her nervousness. Samantha walked in, her steps slow and deliberate. She had always been the one to stay in the background, to keep the peace, but today was different. "Rachel," Samantha began, her voice steady, "I've been watching you for weeks now, and I think it's time you face the truth." Rachel raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting the confrontation to come so directly. "What are you talking about, Samantha?" she replied with a thin smile, trying to mask the insecurity creeping through her. "You've always been bitter about not being in the spotlight. Is that why you're doing this? I thought you'd get over it." Samantha didn't flinch. "No, Rachel. I'm not bitter. I'm here to expose the truth. You've been handed everything. This business, the title, the respect, and you've done nothing but fail to live up to it." With that, Samantha placed a stack of papers on the table. "These are the records, the reports you've mishandled. These are the deals you've botched. I've gone over every detail. The mistakes you've made are piling up, and I've got all the evidence I need." Rachel's face paled as she flipped through the documents, her confidence slipping away with each page. Her hands trembled, her mask of perfection cracking. Rachel began, her voice faltering. "This isn't what it looks like. I'm still figuring things out. I can fix this." Samantha leaned in, her eyes cold. "You had your chance, Rachel. You're not the leader you think you are. You never were. I built this business. I kept it going. And now I'm going to take it back. You've proven that you don't deserve it." The silence in the room was deafening. Rachel looked around as if waiting for her parents to intervene, to defend her. But they remained silent, their eyes fixed on the confrontation. The truth was out, and there was no denying it anymore. Rachel felt the ground beneath her feet start to crumble. She had always believed that she could charm her way out of any situation, that her beauty, her social connections, and her smooth talk would be enough to maintain control. But today, Samantha had destroyed that illusion. The business she had been handed wasn't hers to command. It had been built on the foundation that Samantha had laid down. Her hands shook as she glanced at the papers Samantha had brought to light. The weight of her mistakes hit her all at once. The deals that had fallen through, the clients she had failed to impress, the promises she had broken. All of it was staring her in the face. How had she missed it? How had she let everything slip through her fingers? Her mind raced, but the desperation clawing at her chest made it hard to think clearly. She could feel the eyes of her parents on her, their disappointment palpable. She had always been the one to succeed, to be praised, and now here she was, exposed, vulnerable, and defeated. "Please," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm not ready. I thought I could do it." But the damage had been done. She had failed, and now she had to face the consequences. For the first time in her life, Rachel didn't have an answer, didn't have a way to charm her way out of a problem. The walls she had so carefully built around her life were crumbling, and she had no one to blame but herself. Samantha stood her ground, waiting for her parents to react. She had just exposed Rachel's flaws, but now came the real test. Would they finally recognize the depth of Samantha's sacrifices? Would they admit that they had been wrong in favoring Rachel all these years? Her father looked up from the papers, his face a mixture of guilt and regret. "Samantha," he began, his voice unsteady, "I didn't realize how much you had been carrying. I thought Rachel had it in her, but I see now how wrong we were." Her mother, who had always supported Rachel, now turned to Samantha. "You've always been the one behind the scenes, Samantha. We took you for granted, but you've proven something today. You've proven your strength, your resilience." Samantha felt a wave of mixed emotions. It was what she had wanted all along, to be recognized for her hard work, for her dedication. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the end of something. She wasn't sure what her next steps would be, but she knew that she couldn't stay in this family dynamic anymore. They had all overlooked her for far too long. Rachel's expression faltered as her parents spoke. She had always believed her family would back her, no matter what, but now they were shifting their loyalty toward Samantha. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. The battle wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about family, trust, and the cost of betrayal. As the meeting wrapped up, Samantha knew that this battle wasn't over yet. Rachel, desperate to hold on to what little she had left, would fight back, no matter what it took. Samantha could already see the seeds of retaliation being planted in her cousin's eyes. But the stakes were higher now. The family dynamic had shifted, and there was no going back. Samantha was about to take full control of the business, but the final confrontation with Rachel would not be an easy one. Rachel's desperation would drive her to take extreme measures. She had already begun to use the remaining allies she had to fight back. She wasn't going down without a fight. Samantha knew that her next move would be even more critical. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Every step she took would either solidify her place as the rightful leader of the business, or it would open the door for Rachel to fight back harder. Rachel's anger was simmering beneath the surface, and the humiliation from the family meeting still stung. She had always believed that the business, the spotlight, the family's admiration, everything was hers by right. Samantha's exposure of her flaws, the cracks in her carefully crafted image, had broken her down in ways she wasn't prepared for. But Rachel wasn't about to let it go. She had one weapon left: manipulation. She knew how to play the game, how to turn people to her side, how to bend the truth in her favor. And now it was time to use those skills to sabotage Samantha's efforts. Rachel made a series of subtle moves, working behind the scenes to undermine Samantha's position. First, she reached out to key investors, playing on their fears and insecurities. Samantha is too emotionally involved in the family business, Rachel said to one of the most influential investors. She's too close to the family dynamics. She's not as objective as I am. The company needs stability, not someone driven by personal vendettas. Her words worked like poison, spreading doubt among the investors who had once supported Samantha. Rachel also made secret meetings with employees, painting Samantha as someone who couldn't be trusted. She promised them a future where they could thrive under her leadership, positioning herself as the visionary who could take the business forward. But Rachel's retaliation wasn't just about words. It was about control. She subtly started to withhold information from Samantha, blocking access to key files and reports. She attempted to isolate her from the decision-making process, hoping that the more Samantha struggled, the more people would begin to question her ability to lead. But what Rachel didn't count on was Samantha's resilience. Samantha had always been the one who knew the business inside and out. And while Rachel might have tried to sabotage her efforts, Samantha was determined not to let her cousin's lies destroy everything she had worked for. Samantha had taken a step back after the family meeting, but now it was time to act. Rachel's retaliation had only fueled her determination to take back what was rightfully hers. She knew that she couldn't continue to play the game on Rachel's terms, allowing her cousin to control the narrative. Samantha had to make her final stand. The first thing she did was solidify her base of support. She reached out to the investors who had previously backed her, showing them the concrete plans she had for the future of the business. She presented them with clear, actionable strategies that proved she was the better choice to lead, not just because of her past sacrifices, but because of her vision for the company's growth. Samantha also began rebuilding trust within the company. She met with the employees Rachel had tried to sway, reminding them of the work they had done together to build the business. She emphasized unity and the importance of working together for the company's success, no matter who was at the helm. But Samantha knew that wasn't enough. She had to confront Rachel directly, not just in private, but in front of the family and the business. The next family meeting would be crucial. This time, Samantha wasn't going to let Rachel get away with manipulating the situation. She had gathered evidence of Rachel's attempts to sabotage her leadership, and she was ready to expose it all. She wasn't just fighting for the business, she was fighting for respect, for recognition, and for her own future. And this time, she wasn't going to lose. The family was caught in the crossfire of Samantha and Rachel's escalating feud. Samantha's father, who had once been so sure of Rachel's abilities, now found himself questioning everything. He saw the way Rachel had manipulated situations, the way she had acted out of desperation rather than strength. But there was still a part of him that didn't want to admit his mistake. Samantha's mother, on the other hand, had been silently rooting for her daughter. She had seen how much Samantha had sacrificed for the family and how she had always been the one who kept things together. Watching Samantha stand up for herself had been eye-opening, and she began to see just how much her daughter had been overlooked. As the family meeting approached, the tension was unbearable. The parents were divided, one side still holding on to Rachel, the other starting to see the truth in Samantha's fight. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about family loyalty, recognition, and what each daughter had brought to the table. Samantha had proven herself time and again, but Rachel's charm was still strong. At the meeting, the family watched as the tension between the two cousins reached a boiling point. It was clear that this battle wouldn't just end with a decision about the company. This was a battle for something deeper: respect, power, and control over the future. Just as Samantha thought she was gaining ground, Rachel made a desperate move to secure her position. In a last-ditch effort to maintain control of the business, she reached out to a powerful third-party investor, someone who had the ability to completely undermine Samantha's plans. The investor was promised a bigger share of the company if they backed Rachel, making it clear that if they didn't support her, they would lose out on future opportunities. Rachel's move threw a wrench in Samantha's strategy. The new threat felt like a betrayal. This was someone she had trusted, someone who had worked with her family for years. Samantha knew that if this deal went through, it could destroy everything she had worked for. She had to act quickly. With everything on the line, Samantha reached out to her own allies, including the employees who had stood by her and the investors who had shown support. She needed to secure their loyalty and prevent Rachel from taking any more ground. The pressure was on, and Samantha could feel the weight of it. But this was her final stand. She couldn't let Rachel or anyone else take what was hers, not after everything she had sacrificed. She had to win. She had to prove that she was more than just the person who kept things running behind the scenes. She was the leader, and no one would take that from her. The day of the final showdown had arrived. Samantha walked into the family meeting with a purpose. The weight of everything that had led up to this moment hung heavy on her shoulders, but her resolve was stronger than ever. She had spent weeks preparing for this, gathering evidence, reaching out to key figures, and strategizing her every move. She wasn't just fighting for control of the business anymore. She was fighting for the recognition, the respect, and the future she had been denied for far too long. Rachel sat at the head of the table, her usual confidence replaced with an air of nervous tension. She could sense that today wasn't going to be like any other meeting. The stakes had never been higher, and she had no idea what Samantha had up her sleeve. She had tried everything to secure her position, from manipulation to deceit, but now it was all coming to a head. Samantha wasted no time. She stood before the family, calm but resolute, and laid out the facts. She presented the evidence of Rachel's mishandling of the business, the missed opportunities, the failed negotiations, and the lies she had told to secure her position. As Samantha spoke, the room grew quieter. Rachel's attempts to defend herself faltered, and her once confident smile slowly faded.
Her father, who had been silent throughout, finally spoke. This is hard to hear, Samantha," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I didn't realize how much you had sacrificed, how much you had done for this family. But Rachel—" He paused, glancing at his daughter. She was supposed to be the one to take over. She was supposed to be the future. Samantha's gaze never wavered. I've been the future all along, Dad. I've been the one keeping this business together, and I've been the one you've overlooked. All I wanted was to be seen, not just as the responsible daughter, but as someone capable of leading this company. And now I'm ready to take what's mine. Rachel, unable to hold back anymore, stood up, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. You can't do this, Samantha. This is my chance. I've worked just as hard as you, but no one sees it. I deserve this. Her eyes were wild, desperate for validation, for a win that was slipping further away from her with every word Samantha spoke. The confrontation reached its peak when Samantha dropped the final piece of evidence, an email exchange between Rachel and a competitor, revealing that she had been secretly undermining the family business to secure a personal deal. The room fell silent as everyone processed the depth of Rachel's betrayal. It was undeniable now. Rachel had crossed a line. Samantha's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood firm. The truth had been revealed, and Rachel's manipulations could no longer be ignored. Her parents were forced to confront what they had avoided for years. The reality of their favoritism, their blind trust in Rachel, hit them harder than they had anticipated. Her father finally spoke, his voice full of shame. I never wanted to believe it, but I see now. I was wrong, Samantha. You've always been the one who kept this family together, and I've taken you for granted. I'm sorry. Her mother, once so supportive of Rachel, looked at Samantha with new eyes. I see it now, sweetheart. You've done everything for this family. I've failed to see your worth, but I won't make that mistake again. Rachel, who had been standing silently in the corner, now collapsed into a chair, her face pale and drawn. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered, her voice breaking. I was just scared. I thought I could do it, but I wasn't ready. I thought you'd be fine with it, Sam. I didn't know how much it would hurt you. The family was divided. Samantha's father seemed genuinely remorseful, but her mother's tears for Rachel clouded her judgment. The dynamic had shifted, but it wasn't a clean break. Samantha had won, but at what cost? The betrayal had hurt everyone, and even though she had secured the business, it felt like a hollow victory.
But as the dust settled, Samantha felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced before. She had stood up for herself, for her dreams, and for what she deserved. The family business might have been hers again, but it wasn't the only thing she wanted anymore. After the confrontation, Samantha took a long, hard look at the family business. She had spent so much of her life pouring herself into it. But now, with everything exposed, she realized she didn't have to be tied to it forever. She had built something far more valuable than just the business. She had built her own identity, her own future. As she sat down at her desk, staring at the files and reports, Samantha made a decision. She wasn't going to just continue running the family business as it had been. She was going to rebuild it, and she wasn't going to do it alone. But there was something else, something that called to her more than anything else: architecture. Samantha had spent years putting her dreams on hold, but now, with the family business secure, she could finally pursue what had always lit a fire in her. It wasn't just about control anymore. It was about creating something that was uniquely hers. Samantha had proven to herself and her family that she was capable of more than they had ever realized. She wasn't just a cog in the machine. She was the architect of her own future, and she was ready to build it from the ground up. Samantha sat in her office, the weight of her decision hanging heavily in the air. She had spent so much of her life giving everything to the family business, and now that it was hers again, she realized that it wasn't all she had dreamed of. The truth was, her heart was no longer fully in it. Architecture, her true passion, had been sidelined for far too long. The idea of designing spaces, creating beautiful, sustainable buildings, and leaving a mark on the world in her own unique way felt more like her destiny now than running a business that had been built on her sacrifices. But she couldn't just walk away from the family business. It was her legacy. She had worked tirelessly to keep it afloat, and there were people who depended on her leadership. The employees, the clients, the partners. She couldn't just leave them behind. After days of internal debate, Samantha made a decision. She would find a way to balance both. She would continue to lead the family business, but she wouldn't let it consume her the way it had in the past. She would hand over some of her day-to-day responsibilities to trusted members of her team, creating space for her to step into the world of architecture. The decision wasn't easy, but she knew it was the only way she could pursue her dreams while also honoring the work she had put into the family legacy. She began taking steps to delegate more, gradually easing herself out of the day-to-day grind and into a role where she could focus on the long-term vision of the business. And as she did, she reached out to architects she had admired for years, beginning to form the connections that would lead her into the field she had always dreamed of. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of freedom. The weight of the family business wasn't gone entirely, but it was lighter now. Samantha was reclaiming her life and her future. Rachel had watched everything unfold from the sidelines, a silent observer as her cousin took back control. The confrontation had shaken her more than she was willing to admit. For the first time, Rachel truly realized the extent of her own insecurities. Her life had been built on superficial qualities, charm, beauty, and the ability to manipulate those around her. But Samantha had proven something she hadn't been able to deny. Rachel wasn't equipped to lead. She had never worked for anything, never truly earned the role she had been handed. The guilt weighed heavily on Rachel. She had tried to manipulate her way into power, thinking it was her birthright, but in doing so, she had pushed away the one person who had always been there for her, Samantha. And now it was too late. Rachel knew that she had a long road ahead if she wanted to rebuild anything with her family, especially with Samantha. But would Samantha ever forgive her? Rachel wasn't sure, but she couldn't let go of the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for redemption. If she could prove herself in the business world, if she could show that she wasn't just the golden child anymore, maybe Samantha would see her differently. She reached out to Samantha, first through a message, then a phone call. "I know I messed up," Rachel said, her voice trembling. "I was wrong, and I don't expect forgiveness right away. But I want to try to make things right, not just with the business, but with us." Samantha, though hesitant, heard the sincerity in Rachel's voice. She didn't reply immediately. There was too much hurt, too much betrayal to work through. But as time passed, Samantha slowly opened up to the idea of reconciliation. It wasn't going to be easy. Trust had been broken, and rebuilding it would take time. But Rachel's willingness to admit her mistakes was a start. The tension within the family was palpable. While Samantha's parents had finally recognized the sacrifices she had made, the damage caused by their favoritism still lingered. Her father, though regretful, struggled to fully grasp the impact of his actions. He had always seen Rachel as the future of the business, but now that image was shattered. He was forced to confront the reality that he had overlooked his daughter, the one who had kept the business running for so long. Samantha's mother, torn between her love for both daughters, had quietly sided with Samantha. But the years of blind loyalty to Rachel couldn't be erased overnight. She found herself grappling with guilt, unsure how to fix the broken relationships. Could they ever truly heal? For Samantha, it wasn't just about reclaiming the business. It was about healing the family. But healing would take time. She didn't expect everything to be mended overnight, and she didn't expect her parents to fully understand the depth of her pain. But she knew that for her to move forward, she needed to make peace with the past, even if that meant taking things one step at a time.
As Samantha's life started to shift, so did her perspective. With her heart set on architecture, new challenges arose. The more she immersed herself in the industry, the more she realized how different it was from the business world she had known. She wasn't just stepping into a new career. She was stepping into an entirely new world, one where her name wasn't synonymous with the family business. It was exciting, but also overwhelming. She encountered obstacles along the way, skepticism from some in the field, doubts from potential clients who questioned her abilities. But Samantha had learned one thing over the years. She had to fight for what she wanted. And so she did. She worked tirelessly, designing small projects first, then taking on larger, more ambitious ventures. Slowly, she began to carve out a space for herself in the architectural world, proving that she wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a creator, a visionary. The more she embraced her new path, the more she realized she had been holding herself back for years. The family business was no longer her anchor, it was her past. The future she had always dreamed of was now hers to build, piece by piece. And as she took on new projects, she felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment that she had never felt in the business world. Samantha had found her place. And in doing so, she realized that she wasn't just rebuilding her life, she was building something that was entirely her own. Samantha stood at the crossroads of her life, the weight of the decision pressing on her. The family business had been her entire world for years, but now, with everything exposed and her dreams of becoming an architect finally within reach, she had to ask herself, could she balance both? Could she continue to lead the family business and pursue her passion? Or was it time to step away completely and forge a new path on her own? She had worked tirelessly, giving every ounce of her energy to ensure the family legacy continued. But now that Rachel's manipulations had been exposed, Samantha couldn't ignore the feelings of betrayal any longer. She had rebuilt her life, not just through reclaiming the business, but through her own vision for the future. Architecture wasn't just a job, it was her calling, the one thing that had always made her heart come alive.
At the same time, she couldn't simply abandon the family business entirely. The employees, the clients, the legacy, she had built it all, and part of her still felt responsible for its future. Her parents, despite their blind loyalty to Rachel in the past, now relied on her. But she realized she couldn't keep doing everything. The balance wasn't sustainable. After many sleepless nights and countless hours spent weighing her options, Samantha made her decision. She would step away from the daily operations of the family business, handing over more control to trusted members of her team. But she wouldn't sever ties completely. Instead, she would take on a strategic role, overseeing the company's long-term vision while allowing others to manage the day-to-day. This way, she could pursue her architectural dreams without losing everything she had built. Rachel's position in the family business remained fragile. Her desperate attempts to redeem herself were evident, but so was the fear that her past mistakes could never be fully undone. Rachel had tried to manipulate her way into success, and though she had been given the business, she now found herself questioning her own abilities. Could she truly lead? Or had she been handed a position she wasn't ready for, only to stumble when it mattered most? As the weeks passed, Rachel began to make moves to regain some measure of control. She met with investors and clients, trying to rebuild her reputation, but the cracks in her leadership were too visible. Samantha's plan had exposed the weaknesses that Rachel had been hiding. And while Rachel was still determined to prove herself, she found herself facing an uphill battle. Her journey of redemption wasn't going to be easy. The tension between her and Samantha remained thick, and every effort Rachel made to reclaim her place seemed to be met with more resistance. Samantha's quiet strength had won her family's respect, but it had also forced Rachel to confront her own limitations. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about Rachel learning to see herself beyond her charm, her connections, and her entitlement. Whether she would succeed in redeeming herself was uncertain, but it was clear that her path to redemption would be a long one. The family dynamic was changing in ways that no one had expected. The confrontation between Samantha and Rachel had shifted the foundation they had all built their relationships on. Samantha's parents had seen their mistakes, but the damage had already been done. They had spent years favoring Rachel, overlooking Samantha's sacrifices, and now they were trying to make amends. But some wounds couldn't be healed overnight. Samantha's father was the first to acknowledge the depth of his mistakes. "I see now how much you've given, Samantha," he said one evening, his voice soft with regret. "I thought I was doing what was best, but I see now I was blind." Samantha nodded, though the weight of the words still hung heavy. "It's not about being right, Dad. It's about understanding the sacrifices I made. I can forgive, but I can't forget." Her mother, too, had come to terms with her role in the division between the sisters. "I've always loved you both," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "But I failed to see what you needed, Samantha. I failed to see you." The healing process was slow. Trust had to be rebuilt, and it wouldn't be easy. But the acknowledgement of their mistakes, the understanding of the depth of Samantha's pain, was a starting point. The family was changing, and so were their relationships. Samantha wasn't sure if she could ever fully forgive them, but for the first time, she felt that they were trying. And that meant something. Samantha's move into the world of architecture was just the beginning of a new chapter in her life. The challenges were immense. She was stepping into an industry where she had no established reputation, no family legacy to rely on. She had to prove herself from the ground up. There were long nights spent drawing plans, attending meetings, and pitching to clients. She faced skepticism from some of the more traditional architects who doubted her abilities. But every challenge only fueled her determination. She had always been the one to prove herself, first to her family and now to the world. Slowly but surely, her efforts began to pay off. She landed her first big project, a sustainable housing development that would help revitalize a struggling part of the city. The work was grueling, but every small victory felt like a step closer to the future she had always wanted. As her career in architecture grew, Samantha realized that this new path wasn't just about proving her capabilities. It was about building something that was hers, something that she had always dreamed of. And as she worked on her projects, she began to see how the skills she had honed in the family business, leadership, vision, strategic thinking, translated into her new career. She wasn't just an architect, she was a visionary, a creator. But as her career began to take off, Samantha found herself facing the ultimate question. Could she truly balance both the family business and her architectural dreams? The truth was, she couldn't do both forever. One day, she would have to choose. But for now, she was navigating both worlds, determined to carve out a future that was truly her own. Samantha sat in her office, the weight of the decision looming over her. The family business had been her life for years, but now her passion for architecture was pulling her in an entirely different direction. The thought of leaving the family legacy behind wasn't easy. It felt like a betrayal in some ways, like she was turning her back on everything she had worked for. But the truth was clear. She couldn't keep living in the shadow of the past. For weeks, she had been balancing both worlds, leading the business and pursuing her dream projects in architecture. It had been exhausting, and despite the small successes, Samantha knew that something had to give. The family business was still a part of her, but it was no longer her future. Architecture was her passion, her dream. It was what she had always wanted to do but had sacrificed for the sake of others. Her mind kept coming back to the architecture projects she had been working on. Each project, from the early stages to the final designs, brought her a sense of accomplishment that the family business never could. It wasn't about money or legacy anymore. It was about creating something meaningful, something that would stand the test of time. Finally, after much reflection, Samantha made her choice. She would step away from the day-to-day operations of the family business. Her role as a leader had served its purpose, but it was time for someone else to take over fully. She would still maintain an advisory position, ensuring a smooth transition and helping the business with strategic direction, but her heart was no longer in it. She would finally give herself the space to pursue architecture without the constant pull of family obligations. Samantha wasn't walking away from her family. She was simply choosing her own path, one that was true to who she was, not just who others wanted her to be. Rachel, on the other hand, had been forced to face the consequences of her actions. The family business wasn't hers by right, it had to be earned, just as Samantha had earned her place in it. But Rachel was determined to prove that she could still lead. She had always relied on charm and manipulation, but now those tools weren't enough. She needed to rebuild her reputation from the ground up. The first step was acknowledging her mistakes. Rachel began working closely with the team, reaching out to the investors and clients she had lost due to her previous actions. It was a humbling experience, one that required her to be honest and vulnerable in ways she never had before. She had always hidden behind her confident facade, but now she had to face the reality of her weaknesses. Rachel also sought advice from people who had once been close to Samantha. She knew that if she wanted to earn respect, she needed to learn the very things that Samantha had mastered: resilience, hard work, and leadership. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, Rachel was willing to put in the effort. The road to redemption was long, and she knew it, but she was willing to walk it, one step at a time. As for Samantha, there were moments when she wondered if Rachel would ever truly change, but she realized that her cousin's redemption was no longer her responsibility. She had fought her own battles, and now it was up to Rachel to find her own way. Samantha had done what she needed to do, to stand up for herself, to prove her worth, and to create the life she wanted. As Samantha's architectural career took off, the tension between her family obligations and personal ambitions began to weigh heavily on her. Her days were filled with meetings, client calls, design reviews, and project deadlines. Meanwhile, the family business was still there, needing attention, needing leadership. It was a constant pull, and there were times when Samantha questioned whether she had made the right choice. But the more she immersed herself in architecture, the more she realized that this was where she belonged. She had always been capable of so much more than just running the family business. Architecture allowed her to express herself creatively, to bring her vision to life, and to make a lasting impact on the world. Samantha learned to delegate more in the family business, trusting her team to manage the day-to-day operations. She wasn't abandoning the business completely, but she was no longer letting it define her every move. She focused on her architectural projects with a newfound energy, knowing that she had made the right choice. There were still challenges ahead. Balancing the two worlds, architecture and the family business, wasn't easy, but Samantha had always been resourceful. She had learned to trust others, to lean on her team, and to focus on what truly mattered. Over time, the tension between the two worlds began to fade, replaced by a sense of balance. Samantha's journey in architecture was far from over. As she secured more high-profile projects, she began to feel the weight of responsibility that came with success. The architecture world was competitive, and every project brought new obstacles, unexpected delays, difficult clients, and designs that didn't turn out as planned. But with each challenge, Samantha grew stronger. She learned to navigate the industry's complexities and to trust her instincts more. Her reputation grew, and soon she was being sought after by some of the most respected firms in the field. The work wasn't always easy, but it was fulfilling in ways she had never experienced before. Samantha knew that her path wasn't just about the success she had built for herself. It was about the impact she could have on the world. She wasn't just designing buildings, she was creating spaces where people could live, work, and grow. And that, more than anything, felt like the future she had always dreamed of. Rachel's path had never been straightforward, but as the weeks passed, she began to realize that she had no one to blame but herself. The family business was still hers in name, but she had lost the trust of the people who mattered most: Samantha, her parents, and the team who had once supported her. Yet, despite her failings, Rachel wasn't ready to give up. She couldn't afford to. Her first step toward redemption was acknowledging that she had relied too much on her charm and connections. She had underestimated the importance of hard work, vision, and dedication. Samantha had shown her that the role she had been given was not a privilege, it was a responsibility. Rachel began to take ownership of her mistakes. She spent long hours reviewing reports, making calls, and reaching out to clients she had previously ignored. It wasn't easy. She had to confront the reality that she couldn't manipulate her way to success anymore. She had to prove herself on her own merits. But even as Rachel worked to rebuild her reputation, a part of her couldn't shake the fear that it might be too late. Samantha had taken back control, and the family business had shifted into a new direction. Would Rachel ever truly be able to regain her place? Or had her mistakes left a permanent mark on her future? Despite the setbacks, Rachel found herself growing. She started making decisions that reflected her new sense of accountability, trying to lead with integrity rather than manipulation. It was a slow, uphill battle, but it was one that Rachel was willing to fight. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that her growth, both personally and professionally, depended on how much she was willing to change. Samantha's relationship with her family remained complex. There had been progress, but healing took time. Her father, although filled with regret, still struggled with his deep attachment to Rachel. He had always seen her as the one who would carry the business forward, and acknowledging that he had made a mistake in choosing her over Samantha was difficult for him. But over time, Samantha noticed the small shifts in her father's attitude. He no longer saw Rachel as the unquestionable heir. He saw her as someone who had room to grow. Similarly, her mother, who had once felt torn, started to realize that Samantha's actions weren't driven by resentment, but by a deep desire to carve out her own path. It was a painful process, but Samantha could sense that her parents were beginning to understand the weight of their past mistakes. Healing didn't happen overnight, and Samantha wasn't sure if she would ever fully forgive them for their years of blind loyalty to Rachel. But she did know that her own future was no longer tied to their approval. She had built something for herself. And as she continued to find her way in both architecture and her relationship with her family, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. Samantha's journey in architecture had been nothing short of transformative. The challenges she had faced in the industry were unlike anything she had ever encountered. The learning curve was steep, and there were moments when she questioned whether she had made the right choice. But each project, each client, and each design pushed her further along the path she had dreamed of for so long. But as she reached new milestones, new challenges arose. Some clients questioned her abilities, considering her transition from the family business to architecture as a hurdle. Skepticism from the industry still lingered, but Samantha learned to navigate the obstacles with grace. She built a network of supporters, other architects, designers, and clients, who saw her for her skill and vision rather than her family ties. Yet, even as Samantha flourished in her career, the weight of balancing her professional success with her familial responsibilities never truly went away. She was making a name for herself, but would she ever fully break free from the family business? As her architectural projects grew in prominence, the question lingered. Should she continue to fight to be recognized for her architectural talent alone, or should she somehow merge her two worlds? The decision wasn't an easy one. On one hand, the family business was still a part of her. She had worked hard to keep it afloat, and her family still relied on her expertise. On the other hand, her architectural career was becoming more fulfilling than anything she had ever done before. But deep down, Samantha knew that her legacy would not just be defined by the family business or her architectural work. It would be defined by her ability to create something meaningful, something that reflected her true self. As she stood at the top of her newest architectural project, looking out over the cityscape, Samantha realized that the answer was simpler than she thought. She had the power to shape her own legacy, to define her own future. The family business was part of her past, but architecture was her future. Samantha had proven to herself and the world that she was capable of greatness. She was no longer the quiet daughter in the background, silently watching as others took the credit. She was the architect of her own destiny, both in her family and in her career. And with each step she took, she knew she was creating something that would last far longer than any business or family legacy. Her journey wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt at peace with the path she had chosen. The world was her canvas, and it was time to build something extraordinary. Samantha stood on the rooftop of her latest project, the sun setting behind the city's skyline, casting a warm golden hue over everything. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she had overcome: the family conflict, the betrayal, the countless hours spent building a future that was entirely her own. It had been a long, challenging journey, but she had arrived at a place of peace. She had reclaimed her life, not just by taking control of the family business, but by choosing the path that truly resonated with her soul. Architecture was no longer just a dream, it was her reality. And as she looked out at the buildings she had designed, the spaces she had created for others to live and work in, Samantha knew that this was her legacy. Her parents had finally accepted her for who she was, no longer the dutiful daughter in the background, but a woman who had forged her own way. There was still work to be done, still healing to be had, but the foundation had been set. Her relationship with Rachel had remained strained, but there was a quiet understanding between them. Rachel, too, was on her own journey of growth, and maybe, just maybe, they could one day rebuild their bond. As for the family business, Samantha had made peace with her decision. She had chosen a new path, but she didn't abandon her past. The company would continue to thrive under new leadership, and Samantha's influence would be felt for years to come, though from a distance. Samantha's future was bright. She was a creator, a visionary, and a woman who had learned that the most important project she would ever work on was herself. The world was full of new opportunities, and Samantha was ready to embrace them all. The journey wasn't over. It was just the beginning. If you've enjoyed Samantha's story and her journey toward self-discovery, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts on how you think she handled the challenges she faced, and let us know what kind of legacy you're working to create in your own life. Thanks for joining us on this emotional journey. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories of triumph and growth.